A headline a long time coming. Yes, some children may have died from COVID shots. You see, the story is actually quite simple, and most of you already know it. While COVID was spreading, and the vaccine was rushed out, largely in part due to the Trump administration and Operation Warp Speed, there were many people with legitimate questions about rushing out a vaccine as quickly as they did, particularly mRNA vaccines. Now, I don't think, and I think I'm vindicated, that this was going to result in like this mass die-off that many conspiracy-minded people actually thought was going to happen. I did think it was insane, however, to tell people without advice from a medical professional who knows their history to get a medication. We've never done that. That's crazy. The way it's supposed to work is this. You as an individual with a unique medical history, go to a doctor. The doctor says yes, no, maybe, whatever makes sense for you. But people were posting online things like, I pulled into a 7-Eleven parking lot and a man stuck a needle in my arm. I just thought that was plumb nuts. You should always get advice from a medical professional, not from a sign in a parking lot or from a podcaster. And see, that's at least what I can say. Here's what happened. As some people rushed without proper medical advice to get a medical treatment that was promoted by the corporate press and the mainstream and YouTube itself, some noticed adverse effects, which is to be expected with literally any vaccine or any medication. And when you tell people to get multiple medications and you are telling them in the news and YouTube's backing it up, don't be surprised when there are some counterindications that are overlooked. Or just in general, I'll put it like this. You give out 50 million vaccines, and it was more than that, and you are going to have a large number of reported adverse events because there is a degree to which vaccines will cause adverse events, and everyone knows it. Here's the problem. The censorship of anyone who dared to say even the simplest of things, like maybe you should talk to a doctor first and not pull into a 7-Eleven parking lot, resulted in this. It could have been simple. It could have been maybe you should talk to your pediatrician before giving your children this medication. And some pediatricians did recommend it. And some children have died, or at least may have died, says The Atlantic. Now it's all coming out. And the story from The Atlantic is actually quite simple. They're saying maybe we shouldn't have censored literally everybody. And maybe we should have admitted that, yes, some people experienced Guillain-Barré syndrome. Eric Clapton famously. And some children may have actually died. Here's the story from The Atlantic. On the Friday after Thanksgiving, Vinay Prasad, the FDA's top vaccine regulator, made a claim that shocked the public health establishment. For the first time, he wrote in a leaked email to his staff, the U.S. FDA will acknowledge that COVID-19 vaccines have killed American children. The agency had supposedly identified at least 10 children who died from getting COVID shots. To say the email was poorly received by vaccine experts and physicians would be an understatement. Prasad's claim provoked a rapid series of rebuttals. A response from 12 former FDA commissioners, published in the New England Journal of Medicine on Wednesday, called Prasad's memo a threat to evidence-based vaccine policy and public health security. All of the potential vaccine-related deaths reported to the government, presumably including those to which Prasad referred, had already been reviewed by the agency staff, the former commissioners wrote, and different conclusions had been reached. Elsewhere, doctors and scientists declared that absolutely no evidence links COVID-19 vaccines to death in children, and that in order to suggest otherwise, Prasad and his colleagues had engaged in an evidence manufacturing mission, a dumpster dive for shoddy data, or worse, a campaign of lying. Prasad is among the public health officials who, under the leadership of RFK Jr., have been systematically undermining the nation's confidence in immunizations. Prasad has not yet offered up any documentation to support his assertion, and his count of vaccine-related deaths may well turn out to be inflated. The memo's overheated rhetoric and lengthy recitation of political grievances also raises some doubts about his claims. Now, after all that, what's this? Yet there's something troubling and telling in the fact that his memo has provoked people to deny even the possibility of COVID vaccine-related deaths. The idea that mRNA-based shots have tragically killed a very small number of children is not far-fetched. It also doesn't imply a catastrophic threat to public health, given the tens of millions of doses of these vaccines have safely been given out to young people, as I've stated the whole time. When COVID vaccine mandates were introduced My argument was actually against those who are like, we're going to see in a couple of years all of these people dying everywhere. And we've not. Now, to be fair, it certainly does seem like there are people missing, but that could be a result of, I don't know, population collapse, which we've also talked about quite a bit. We have not seen evidence of tens of millions of people or even 100 million people dropping dead mysteriously. There are a lot of conspiracies about dying suddenly, and I do think it's particularly interesting. I think it's actually quite simple. If you give out, let's say the rate of injury for a vaccine is 1 in 300,000, which for some of the more modern ones, it is. If you give out 1 million doses, you are going to have on average around 3 adverse events. Now, just 1 million doses spread across the country, no one's really going to report on some dude who fainted while playing soccer. It's just one guy. But if you give out not just 1 million, but 200 million, then 200 million boosters, then 200 million boosters, now we're talking about thousands of people. And when thousands of people start having adverse events, it pops up in the news and people say, hey, wait a minute, why are we seeing so much of this? YouTube, big tech, and all the platforms then began to censor and ban anybody who dared talk about it because they think you're stupid. They go on to say, now in a moment when public health in America is under existential threat, this insistence that no evidence exists for vaccine-related death risks adding to the crisis. I agree. Now, Atlantic, why didn't you say all this during the lockdowns? No public health authorities deny that COVID shots can have some ill effects. Adverse reactions are possible with all medical interventions. The mRNA-based vaccines produced by Pfizer and Moderna in particular are known to cause myocarditis, inflammation of the heart. On rare occasions, especially in teenage boys and young men, the form of myocarditis that occurs after vaccination is typically far less severe than the one caused by viruses for unclear reasons. mRNA-related cases have largely disappeared in recent years, but this condition can be deadly, and considering the hundreds of millions of mRNA doses that have been administered to Americans, even extraordinarily unlikely outcomes may well be inevitable. In August of 2021, U.S. physicians published details of a 42-year-old man's post-vaccination death from myocarditis. They say South Korean researchers and public health officials who tracked post-immunization fatalities very closely identified a total of 21 deaths from vaccine-induced myocarditis. Now, here's the thing. They denied myocarditis and pericarditis when all of this was going on. You get the point. They're angry about RFK Jr. and his team's statements about all of this stuff and all of these vaccines, but y'all don't have a clean record either. So let me just say, my friends, this is why I care so much about the midterms. I don't want to go back to a time when people couldn't get jobs or go outside or go into buildings unless they got a mandated medication for some people that may have been, or for some people, it may have been counterindicated, or they may have been counterindications is the right way to say it. That is, when I saw people posting, there was one incident where a man said, a prominent figure, go get vaccinated. And I responded with, no, go talk to your doctor first. Why? I called my doctor and I said, what are your thoughts on the COVID vaccine? And they said, it's great to see that they're releasing a product. It's best for the young and the elderly. And I said, should I get it? And they said, no. So at the time, I think I was 35. And they said, you're 35, you're fit, you don't really need it. You exercise, you should let someone else get it. And I said, okay, that's it. I didn't just blindly believe what everybody on the right was saying or those who believed vaccines were all bad. Many conservatives actually got the vaccine. Some regretted it. Some didn't. Many got sick. They got myocarditis and pericarditis. Some people had Guillain-Barré syndrome and some people had strokes, but that's what happens when you give out like a billion of these things. That doesn't mean I think it's a great product. I have no idea. Just that when the media began to suppress and lie about everything. So anyway, I tweeted to this guy, no, go to your doctor and ask him. He responds to me, that's weird. I just pulled into a parking lot and got the vaccine. And I said, bro, you let a stranger in the street inject something into your arm. What? I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. I've heard all these stories, and so have you. But the important thing to understand is that if there's something I call the scaling problem. If you give out 10 vaccines, nobody gets sick. You give out 100 vaccines, maybe you might get one person, but if they do, no one really says much. When you give out 100,000, you do on average, you'll get, maybe one. I think they say it's like, no, I think it's like 1 per 300,000 was the actual number they gave. Maybe that's not true, whatever. The point is this. No one cares about the one story. But if you have 1,000 stories, now all of a sudden it's a crisis, even if it's the same margin of error or failure. As a system grows larger, the tolerance for deviation or failure diminishes because of the perception the problem is more widespread. The way I often describe it is, if Apple gave out 100 experimental new iPhones to 100 celebrities and 1% broke, you get one celebrity being like, dang, my phone broke. Nobody cares. They go, oh, that sucks. Just one phone. Let's say they give out 100 million phones and 1% break. That's 1 million phones. All of a sudden, you've got stories popping up everywhere of people saying, my phone broke too. What's going on? Why are these phones breaking all the time? That's the scaling problem. The same margin of error, but the perception is that it's a lot worse. So, my friends, here we are. They say denial only serves the aims of anti-vaxxers. Indeed. Y'all irrational lunatics censoring everybody. We tried to warn you. I'll leave it there. Smash the like button, share the show with everyone you know. Stay tuned. We got more to come, and we'll see you all in the next segment.